Many 100,000 times good night. My daughter Veronica, so dear to my heart. Innocent I came to jail. Innocent I was tortured. Innocent I must die. For whoever comes to the house either must become a witch, or be tortured for so long that he claims something pulled from his imagination and God of mercy figures out something to say. I want to tell you how things have gone for me.
This letter was written on the 24th of July in 1628 by Johannes Junius, the Burgermeister or Mayor of Bamberg, a city in Germany. Junius wrote this letter in secret from his jail cell as a final goodbye to his daughter after he was accused of witchcraft. His is one of a vast number of cases in the witch trials of Bamberg. The witch trials of early modern Europe span from roughly 1450 to 1750. In this time frame, about 90,000 people were prosecuted for witchcraft in Europe, and out of these 90,000, around 45,000 were executed. Some of the largest trials took place in Germany in places like Würzburg, Trier, and Bamberg. While many more died in witch trials, this period was the peak of witch persecutions in what is known today as the witch craze. Among these numerous trials, the case of Johannes Junius stands out, in part because there are very few first-hand accounts from those accused of witchcraft, and also because Junius diverged from the demographic patterns most commonly associated with witchcraft accusations. That is to say, as a prominent male elite, he did not resemble what people of the time imagined a witch might be. In his letter, Junius does more than say goodbye to his daughter. He offers a detailed account of his arrest, interrogation, and confession. He describes a system where torture compels false confessions, where accusations multiply uncontrollably, and where innocence offers no protection. Junius wrote his letter once he had already confessed and was sentenced to death. This is made clear by the intention of the letter being a final goodbye to his daughter, as well as the fact that he says in the beginning of the letter that he must die for the crimes he was accused of. Since the letter was written after the fact, it may seem difficult to establish what Junius knew or thought at each stage of his process. However, Junius explains these events from his perspective at the time that they were happening. This allows the reader to understand what Junius understood was happening at certain points in his trial. As Junius's account progresses, it becomes clear that at the time of his arrest, he had little understanding of the process of a witch trial. As the narrative unfolds, we can see that Junius understands that his fate was decided from the start. He begins the letter by showing a strong sense of confidence that he would be found innocent, and ends with the understanding that he was found guilty the moment he was accused. In his letter, how does Junius explain the process of constructing a witch?
When I was put to the question the first time, Dr. Braun, Dr. Kotzendorfer, and the two foreign doctors were there. Then Dr. Braun from Absworth asked me, "Kinsman, how did you end up here?" I answered through lies and misfortune. "Listen, you," he said. "You are a witch."
In a case from early 16th century Basel that has the ring of a folktale, 3 witches sat together under a peach tree in spring. They considered what they wanted to eat. The first wanted all the cherries that there would be that year as a compote. The second wanted all the birds that would hatch that year. And the third, all the wine that would be grown. These were women with gargantuan appetites, hungry for luxury, food, cherries, little birds, and wine. Sitting together under the peach tree, they plotted how to steal this wonderful food, eat it all themselves, and destroy spring with its promise of rebirth and plenty. And then they attacked a woman in childbed, taking the milk from her breasts, killing the baby, and nearly killing her too out of envy. The witch was a woman who wanted it all for herself, and who envied others. If she could cause a mother's milk to dry up, she could do the same to cows, or make the butter fail to churn. She represented the destruction of fertility itself. To understand the particularities of the case of Johannes Junius, it helps to understand the idea of the witch. The picturesque notion of the old crooked-nosed hag brewing potions in a cauldron and flying to witches' Sabbaths in the night did not always exist as such. Prior to the 13th century, witchcraft was seen as a relatively benign folk practice, usually to do with healing. The church at the time was not as concerned with these practices and mostly wrote them off as harmless superstition. However, in the 13th century, the papacy became increasingly concerned over magical practices and began to associate them with the diabolical. The perception of these practices shifted from harmless folk tradition to heresy. It was seen as inherently demonic. It was now a tangible danger rather than an illusion. It is only toward the end of the 14th century that we begin to see witchcraft as an inherently female crime, and the witch as inherently a woman. From the start, witchcraft had misogynistic characteristics, harming fertility, causing impotence, infanticide, and sexual deviance, among others. While these characteristics are not exclusive to women, it began to be perceived that way. Women were already viewed as weak and easily seduced by evil. There was a perception by leaders of witch trials that because women were especially prey to the devil's temptations, that their lust could undermine social and religious order. Being an old woman was an even bigger risk factor at the time. Demonologists spent a lot of time explaining how older women were envious of younger women's ability to have children and become mothers. For this reason, older women would supposedly use demonic powers to kill newborns out of jealousy. Older women were also seen as drier than younger women, especially after menopause. They thought that when a woman no longer menstruated, their body stopped getting rid of impurities. This was used as an argument to explain that older women were more lustful and wanted to restore their youth. In early modern Europe, women had to abide by strict gender roles, these roles being childbearing, motherhood, care, healing. If they failed to do so, they did not fill their conventional role and thus were suspicious. This is why older women were thought to be so jealous, so that they could once again fit within society. However, since they could no longer have children and fill their intended role, early modern society saw them as outsiders, more likely to be a witch. This ties infanticide to witches. The old jealous witch cannot stand that younger women have and care for children, so they kill them, often sacrificing them at witches' Sabbaths, possibly to regain their long-lost youth. In a world with a higher rate of child mortality, where infertility was a serious threat to one's ability to fulfill their expected gender roles, and even worse, to have no explanation or solution to this suffering, the witch made the perfect target to pin all the blame. If only we rid ourselves of this blight, maybe then these incessant tragedies will come to an end. The idea of the witch is best understood as a scapegoat, a person who is blamed for all that is wrong and unexplained in society. In a world full of uncertainty and inexplicable tragedy such as war, famine, and disease, people search for someone to blame. At the core of the notion of witchcraft is the concept of inversion. The famous witches' Sabbath is simply a religious ritual inversed. Instead of taking part in religious ceremonies, they attend witches' Sabbaths. Instead of baptizing children, they sacrifice them. Instead of praying to God, they worship the devil. This mirrors the anxieties that people had in their real lives. If children are meant to live long lives and women are meant to have children, and people shouldn't suffer for no reason, witches represent the inversion of these expectations, and thus are to blame. Though men were accused of witchcraft, most of the accused fit the mold. Women, often poor, vulnerable, could easily be blamed for almost any problem with little consequence. In contrast to this, Johannes Junius seemed like a rather unusual suspect. A male, wealthy, a respected member of Bamberg's political elite, he was not marginal, and did not fit any of the common depictions of a witch, yet he was still accused. Since the Middle Ages at least, Western societies have established the confession as one of the main rituals we rely on for the production of truth. the codification of the sacrament of penance by the Lateran Council in 1215, with the resulting development of confessional techniques, the declining importance of accusatory procedures in criminal justice, the abandonment of tests of guilt, and the development of methods of interrogations and inquest, the increased participation of the royal administration in the prosecution of infractions at the expense of proceedings leading to private settlements, the setting up of tribunals of inquisition. All this helped to give the confession a central role in the order of civil and religious powers.
Do you wish to confess it freely? If not, witnesses will be brought forward along with the executioner. I said I am no witch. I have a clean conscience in this matter, even if there were 1,000 witnesses, so I am not at all worried, but I will gladly hear the witnesses. Then the son of the Chancellor, Dr. Hahn, was brought in, and I asked him, "Sir Doctor, what do you know of me? I've never had anything to do with you, neither for good nor for ill, at any time in my life." Then he answered me, "Sir colleague, on account of the regional court Landgericht, I beg you, produce your witnesses. I saw you when they held court." "Oh, but how?" He did not know. So I asked the commissioners to place him under oath and examine him properly. Dr. Braun said they would not do it as he would have it done. It is enough that he saw you. "Go on, Sir Doctor," I said. "So, sir, what kind of a witness is this? If things can be done this way, then you are no more certain of the facts than I or any other honest man." There was no questioning of the witness. Then the Chancellor came and said the same thing as his son, namely that he had also seen me, but he had not looked at my feet to see what I was. Then came Hopfensels. She claimed to have seen me dancing in the Hopstmoor forest. I asked her how she saw. She answered that she did not know. I appealed to my lords for God's sake. They heard that these were all poor witnesses. They should be sworn to an oath and properly questioned. But that was not to be. Rather, they said, I should confess voluntarily, or the executioner would certainly force me to do so.
This part of the letter explains the beginning of his interrogation, where he was presented with the witnesses. Prior to this, Junius affirmed that he was not concerned with witnesses, regardless of how many there were, since he was innocent. When presented with the witnesses, he is met with the Chancellor's son, Dr. Hahn, and an accused day laborer who claimed to have seen him participating in witchcraft. Junius was outraged. He questioned the validity of the witnesses and demanded they be put under oath to confirm their testimonies. This request was denied by the interrogators, who claimed that the fact they claimed to have seen Junius was enough proof. Junius critiqued further by saying that if these are the evidentiary standards, they might as well ask anyone and take them at their word. At this point, Junius is shocked at the way the trial is being conducted. From what he describes in the letter, it appears that going into the trial, Junius had certain expectations concerning the evidence that would be required to prosecute him and judge him guilty. Was Junius right to be outraged? From a modern lens, we can safely say that confessions obtained under torture or coercion are unreliable. However, in early modern Europe, legal standards were very different. The Code of Civil and Criminal Law in the Holy Roman Empire at the time was the Constitutio Criminalis Carolina. It included a definition for the crime of witchcraft as well as how judicial proceedings for witchcraft should be handled. While this code applied to all territories within the empire, power was not entirely centralized. This means that the central power did not have total control over each territory, and different territories could apply certain rules differently. Essentially, a lot was left to the specific territory's discretion. When it came to evidence, the Roman canonical law states that 2 reliable witnesses constitutes solid evidence. If sufficient evidence was found, torture was then considered permissible. If we look at how Junius's case was being handled, it seems to mostly follow the rules. There was sufficient evidence, since there were 6 witnesses in total, many of them being elites, and there was at least 1 doctor present during torture. Though Junius was an educated, literate elite, there's no evidence suggesting whether he was necessarily familiar with the Caroline Code or Roman canonical law. We cannot say for certain if he was aware of the laws concerning witch trials. His request to place the witnesses under oath and question once again was not one that the Inquisition had to comply with. Dr. Braun's denial of this request did not necessarily break any rules. While the witnesses needed to be reliable, it was up to the discretion of the inquisitors and not the accused to determine if this is the case. Even if Junius wanted to take it further and appeal to a higher court, both civil and criminal cases could not be appealed under the Constitutio Criminalis. While there is a possibility that Junius was aware of the law and was merely trying everything he could to free himself, the shock he expressed when confronted with the witnesses and his subsequent reaction to have them questioned once more suggests that he may have been unaware of the lack of recourse he had at this point.
I answered, I have never renounced God, and did not plan to do so, and God should mercifully prevent me from doing so. I would rather endure what I had to. And then came God in highest heaven have mercy, the executioner, and put the thumbscrews on me, both hands bound together so that the blood ran out at the nails and everywhere, so that for 4 weeks I could not use my hands, as you can see from the writing. So I put myself in the care of God in his 5 sacred wounds, and said, because this concerns God's honor and name, which I have never denied, therefore I will commend my innocence in all the tortures and harm to his 5 wounds, and he will lessen my pain so that I can endure such pain. Thereafter they first stripped me, bound my hands behind me, and drew me up in the torture. Then I thought heaven and earth were at an end. 8 times did they draw me up and let me fall again, so that I suffered horrible agony. Dear child, 6 witnesses have testified at the same time against me. The Chancellor, his son, Nüdiker, Zehner, Hofmeister's Ursel, and Hopkins Els, all falsely through coercion, as they all have told me, and begged me to forgive them for God's sake before their sentences were executed. They knew nothing but good and nice things about me. They were just forced to say it, just as I myself would experience. I can have no priest. Take careful note of this letter. And all this happened when I was utterly naked, as they had me undressed completely. And when our Lord God came to my aid, I said to them, God forgive you for attacking an innocent man in this way, wanting to take not only his life and soul, but also his goods and possessions. Dr. Braun said, you are a rascal. I said, I am no rascal, nor any such man, and I am just as honest as you all are. But so long as things go this way, no honest man in Bamberg will ever be safe. You know more than I, or anyone else. The doctor said he was not subject to diabolical temptations. I said, nor am I. But your false witnesses, they are the devils, as well as your vicious tortures. For you let no one go, not even if he withstands all tortures. And this happened on Friday the 30th of June. I had to endure all the tortures with God's help. And I was unable to get dressed this whole time or use my hands without the other pain that I had to suffer innocently.
Junius's interrogation was done in the Jurden House, also known as the Malefie's House or the Witch's House, a prison built by the Prince Bishop Johann George II Fuchs von Dornheim, expressly to house accused witches. Von Dornheim held both secular and religious power, and is the one responsible for the witch trials of Bamberg. Understanding this building and why it was built is crucial to understanding the witch trials of Bamberg, and by extension, the case of Junius. The prison caused a proliferation in witchcraft accusations in Bamberg. The prison was made on the grounds that there were more witchcraft accusations, therefore, Bamberg required more space dedicated specifically to detaining suspects. This is not sound reasoning, however, since a higher rate of accusation does not equate to a higher crime rate. And it was not a logistics issue, since at the time of the construction of the house, Bamberg had a lot of room in its already existing prisons. This means that it was built out of anticipation for more suspects, not out of a need for more space. It is a supply that generates its demand. This is proven by the proliferation of the trial after the prison was built. This is unusual since in most cases, places like hospitals or other partially unoccupied buildings could double for more space if necessary. The prison was the first of its kind, meaning the first prison in Europe made entirely of single cells. This prison is unique not only in its architecture, but its purpose, which was solely to house witches. This served a symbolic purpose for von Dornheim. Since witchcraft was an invisible crime, the presence of a prison named after witches and made for witches would add a physical element to the trials. People could see where the witches were in their own town. This made the issue seem much more real and omnipresent. As Prince Bishop, von Dornheim was on the Catholic side of the 30 Years' War that was ravaging Europe at the time of the Bamberg trials. The war between Catholics and Protestants caused massive fear and societal unrest. Von Dornheim was waging a war on two fronts, though he may have seen it as one, the first being witches and the second being Protestants. This was encouraged by another man in Bamberg named Friedrich Forner, who goaded von Dornheim into starting the trials. In his book, Forner explains that both witchcraft and Protestantism need to be eradicated to protect Christianity. He equates Protestantism with heresy, the work of the devil. He even equates it with magic. While witch hunts were by no means Protestant hunts, the trials of Bamberg were undeniably linked to the 30 Years' War. There is a decent precedent for this as well. Neudecker, the first Bamberg burgomaster accused of witchcraft that later denounced Junius, was a Reformed Protestant. This likely contributed to his accusation. It is not unreasonable, based off this, that George Hahn and Junius himself may have also been Protestants, or at least Reformed Protestants, due to their proximity. Distress caused by sectarian conflict as well as a recent crop failure caused immense amount of social unrest in Bamberg. Perhaps political elites made good scapegoats during times of war. At the time of his torture, Junius seemed to have some hope left that he would be let go. In his own words, God would help him endure the tortures, which would then prove him innocent. Even under torture, Junius was likely not yet aware that the aim was not to learn if he was innocent or guilty, but to extract a confession at any cost. Intuitively, one would think that confessing nothing under torture would absolve an individual. If someone can withstand extreme pain and maintain that they are innocent, then it is highly likely that they are. However, in these interrogations, resistance was viewed as a sign that it was the devil giving the accused strength to resist pain. In other words, Junius's resistance meant nothing to the inquisitors other than the fact that they did not yet have proof from him directly. Junius was first confronted with the witnesses in the hopes he might realize that there was a strong case against him and that he would confess immediately. Junius said he was innocent. He was then tortured with thumbscrews, then leg screws, and the strappado, and Junius still said nothing. This part of the letter shows the first part of becoming a witch. Junius, an innocent man, is denounced and brought in for questioning. He denies the accusations, thinking that pleading his case will help. He is then tortured in an attempt to extract a confession, but he still admits nothing.
When the executioner took me back to jail, he said to me, "Sir, I beg of you, for God's sake, confess something, whether it be true or not. Invent something, for you cannot bear the torture which you shall suffer. And even if you can bear it all, you still shall not escape, not even if you were a count. But one torture will follow another until you say you are a witch. Not before that will they let you go, as you may see by their trials, for one is just like another." And George came to me and said my Lord wanted to set such an example with me that people would be amazed. The executioners have been saying this the whole time and wanted to torture me again, and he begged me for God's sake to think something up, because even if I were entirely innocent, I'd never go free. Candlegieser, Nudiker, and others said the same thing to me. So I made a plea, saying that I was in very bad shape. They would give me a day to think about it and send me a priest. They refused me a priest, but gave me the time to think. Now, dearest daughter, can you imagine in what kind of danger I was and still am? I was supposed to say that I was a witch, though I am not, and I am supposed to renounce God for the first time, though I have never done so before. I worried myself sick day and night, and finally I hit upon a plan. I would not worry about it, as I had not been allowed to see a priest who could advise me whether I should think something up and say it. I would surely be better to say it with my mouth and with words, even though I had not really done it. And afterwards I would confess it to the priest, and let those answer for it who compelled me to do it. Then I asked to see the Father Prior in the Dominican monastery, but I was not allowed to see him. And then my statement as follows is entirely made up.
What did break Junius was not the pain, but the knowledge that he would not be let go until he confessed, and that his elite status did not matter. This is a key component of creating a witch, not simply coercion, but readily telling the accused that the only way out is through confession. Junius states this exactly in his letter, and this is when we could see his goal change from proving his innocence to proving his guilt. Upon entering the jail and being confronted, Junius seemed confused and betrayed. People he knew and thought he had good relationships with, and strangers he had no dealings with, had accused him of a crime for which he would likely die. He pled his case. He even withstood torture in an attempt to prove his innocence. Clearly, he thought there was at least some chance that he may go free. Oddly, it was without torture that Junius broke. The interrogator begged him to say something so that he would stop being tortured. Then George Hahn told him that von Dornheim would make an example of him. This piece of information is extremely important. For some reason, von Dornheim had it out for Junius. There are two potential reasons why this could have been the case. The first is that Junius may well have been a Protestant, or Reformed Protestant at least. This would make sense considering von Dornheim's view of Protestantism and heresy. It follows that under his prince-bishopric, he would not want any Protestants in positions of power. We have evidence that he persecuted at least one Protestant mayor for witchcraft, Neudecker. Then George Hahn, the next mayor, also accused of witchcraft, warns the third mayor, Junius, who is also accused, that von Dornheim wants to make an example of him. While we can't confirm for certain that Hahn and Junius were also Protestant, the fact that they were all accused one after the other forms a suspicious pattern. The second reason that von Dornheim may have wanted Junius to be accused would be for his money. It is known that von Dornheim knew of Junius's wealth because he was aware of his debts. Prior to his accusation, debtors complained to von Dornheim about Junius's massive debts, which may have been related to expenses related to his wife's witch trial. Von Dornheim had spent a lot of money on building the Druden house, and on the trial as a whole. When someone is accused of witchcraft, their assets are seized, and it's known that von Dornheim had used funds obtained from accused witches to build the prison. Since the trials cost a lot of money, accusing wealthy elites would benefit his aim, since their assets would fund the trials. Junius was certainly aware of this, since in the letter he includes a comment he made about the Inquisition not only hurting an innocent man, but also taking his possessions. Essentially, the Druden house was a house built for witches, by witches. Whether the motives were sectarian or monetary, when the interrogator begged Junius to confess, and when George Hahn told him that von Dornheim wanted to make an example of him, Junius's goal shifted to thinking up a confession. This tells us that whether it was true or not, Junius likely thought that there was some ulterior motive behind his accusation. Otherwise, there would not have been a need to explain this in his letter. Junius describes his experience from his point of view of when the events were unfolding. When he explains the beginning of his imprisonment, he describes his disbelief and lack of understanding of his situation. When he learns that von Dornheim wants to make an example of him, he explains from the perspective of someone who is much more aware of what they're being subjected to. This part of the letter explains the process of creating a witch, first with torture, which loosens the tongue of the accused, then making the accused aware that a confession is demanded, not the truth.
Now follows, dear child, the statement I made, such that I escaped the worst and hardest tortures, which I could not possibly have withstood any longer. Namely, when I had a commission from Rottweil in the year 1624 or 1625, I had to give the doctor 600 gulden for the commission, and that I addressed many honest people who had been of assistance to me. That is all true. Now follows my statement, which is pure lies, which I would have had to say under questioning accompanied by even greater tortures, and for which I must die. After that, I said I was walking in a depressed state in my field near the Frederiksbrunnen. I sat there, and a wild girl came to me and said, "Sir, what are you doing? And why are you so sad?" I answered that I did not know. So they came closer, and as soon as that happened, she became a billy goat and said to me, "See, now you see with whom you are dealing." She grabbed me by the throat and said, "You must be mine or I will kill you." And I said, "God, save me from that." So they disappeared and came back quickly, bringing 2 women and 3 men with them. I was to deny God, and I have confessed that I did so. I was to deny God and the heavenly host, and I have confessed that I did so.
When Junius began to confess, he tells a typical tale of witchcraft. Most people feared witches, so they had at least a general idea of what a witch looked like. When Junius decided he would invent a story for his confession, we see this general portrayal of a witch. He's going about his business, stressed for financial reasons, when a woman appears before him and asks him what is wrong. Not long after, she reveals herself to be a devil and threatens him. He recoils and sends her away in the name of God before she returns with more demons. At this point, Junius is outnumbered, so he concedes. He is then baptized in the name of the devil and given a new name, Crix. In the case of accused female witches, there is often an element of seduction. Women are seen as weak and easily seduced, therefore, when they are accused of witchcraft, they often confess to having sex with the devil. In Junius's confession, we could see the same story of seduction. A seemingly sympathetic woman comes up to him and asks him why he is sad. And according to the documents of his trial, he then had an affair with her. before she turned into a demon, which then led to him forsaking God. Now, it may seem that the Inquisition had everything they needed at this point, several witnesses and now a confession from the suspect himself, given without torture. However, at this point, there was still much that the Inquisition needed Junius to say.
I have confessed that he then baptized me, and the two women were the sponsors, and he gave me a ducat, but then it turned out to be a shard. Then, thinking that I had finished, they sent the executioner to me, and asked where I had been to go dancing, and I did not know which way was up. I remember that the Chancellor, his son, and Hopfenzel's had named the old court, the council chambers, and the Hopstmoor, as well as other things I'd heard them read out in such cases. And I named those same places as well. Then I was supposed to say what sort of people I had seen there. I said that I had not recognized them. You old rascal. Must I set the executioner on you? Wasn't the Chancellor there? I said. Yes. Who else? I recognized no one, I said. So, he said, take one street after the other in turn. First go out to the market and then back in again. So I had to name a number of people and then turned to the Longegas. I recognized no one from there. But I had to name 8 persons from there. Then Sickenwort, another person, then on to the upper bridge and out to the George Gate on both sides. I said I didn't recognize anyone from there either. I was asked if I hadn't recognized someone from the castle. Whoever it might be, I should say so without hesitation. And they asked me about all the streets in this way, and I neither wanted nor could say anything more. So they turned me over to the executioner, who was told to uncloth me, cut my hair off, and put me on the rack. This rascal knows someone in the marketplace, spends time with them every day, and refuses to name them. And they named Dietmeier, and I was forced to name him too. And I was forced to say what sort of evil things I had done. I said nothing. He expected something from me, but because I would not do it, he struck me. Hoist the rascal up. So I said that I had been told to kill my children, but instead I killed a horse. It didn't help. So I said that I had also taken a consecrated host and buried it. Once I said that, they left me in peace.
Even once Junius openly admitted to being seduced by demons and being baptized by the devil, there was more they needed to know. What Junius had given was what he thought they wanted to hear. He knew this since his accusation was of witchcraft, and during his interrogation and torture, he was repeatedly asked to confess to witchcraft. This shaped his confession. The story he was able to construct based off of that was one that answered questions that they had asked thus far. The problem with Junius's confession at this point was its incompleteness. It proved his guilt, but it was far too generic. What the letter describes next is a phenomenon not completely unlike the Freudian concept of transference and countertransference. In fact, Freud himself thought these two phenomena were extremely alike. In psychotherapy, transference is when a patient projects feelings they hold for someone else onto their therapist. For example, if the patient has parents who are critical of them, as they speak to their therapist, they begin to think that they are also judging them and being critical of them. The patient will then treat the therapist as they would their parent. Countertransference is when the reverse happens. The therapist notices the patient's emotional reaction and responds almost as the patient's parents as the therapist begins to identify with them. In the context of witch interrogations, once the accused starts to understand what the interrogator wants to hear and identify with their needs, they begin to construct a story they think will be useful to them. When the interrogator hears this and realizes that his suspicion turned out to be exactly correct all along, he proceeds to ask more leading questions which then get confirmed by the accused. This is a big part of the mechanism that generates witchcraft confessions. It was not only the interrogator on his own that constructed the story, nor was it the accused. It was a collaboration between the two that constructed the fantasy of the witch. In Junius's letter, we see this with his initial confession that he was what everybody commonly knew to be a witch. Once this was confirmed, the interrogator was proven right and continued to probe for more details. A simple admission of guilt was not convincing enough, however. There needed to be more precise and personal details. If all confessions were the same admission that they colluded with the devil, they wouldn't be convincing enough. They wouldn't be real. They had to have some personal element to make them more convincing. When Junius said there was no more to say, that he had confessed to everything, they continued to torture him despite having the evidence they needed to execute him. Luckily enough, however, the Inquisition, with the help of the witnesses, provided Junius with the correct details. Namely, Hopfensels had said that the Sabbaths were held in forests, but also in the old court and council chambers. This makes the confession more realistic, since as a mayor, he would have occupied such places. Hopfensels, as a peasant, likely named these places for the same reasons that Junius did. Where else would you see a corrupt mayor, other than the council chamber where he might be plotting against the people of Bamberg? It only makes sense. Another personal touch that Junius added was that the devil gave him money. In his confession, he said that the devil had gave him a ducat, a valuable coin. But then it turned out to be fake. This lines up with the deceptive nature of the devil, but more importantly, Junius was facing financial struggles at the time, which may have made him easy to lead astray. Junius was also forced to denounce several others. Junius seemed to have gained a good understanding of the cycle of denunciations that would occur in these trials when he himself had to denounce others. When he tried telling the interrogator that he recognized nobody else apart from the witnesses that had already denounced him, he was tortured even more. The way Junius chose who to denounce can be seen as another case of transference. Junius knows that the interrogator is certain he knows other witches, so the interrogator asks leading questions such as asking who he knew from the castle or who he frequently walked with. This is the interrogator giving Junius a clue, consciously or not, of who he wants him to name. Junius is then able to infer from this who the interrogator wants him to name. This means that perhaps if von Dornheim had it out for Junius or wanted to seize his assets at the least, he could have left hints to the interrogators, the Inquisition, that Junius is suspicious, which could have in turn caused the interrogators to name him in the trials of Hopfensels and George Hahn, to then denounce Junius. But even after this highly personalized confession and series of denunciations, Junius continued to be tortured. The last thing he had to do was demonstrate an attack on God and Christianity. What finally put an end to the tortures was not the adultery or the pact with the devil, but burying the host. This was a direct assault on the body of Christ and an attack on Christianity itself. Once Junius had done this, he had created a sufficient case for the Inquisition to finally condemn him to death. This letter was likely intended to be a goodbye or a warning to his daughter, and an affirmation of his honor and faith to his loved ones. The letter demonstrates each stage of a witch trial interrogation and what many accused witches most likely thought and experienced at different parts of the process. At first, a sense of outrage and a strong will to defend oneself even under torture. Then a realization that the Inquisition was already decided and all they wanted was a confession. To the most sinister part, the construction of the confession, a collaboration between the accused and the interrogator to forge a fantasy and to denounce countless others in a cycle that would result in the death of tens of thousands across Europe. In his attempt to defend himself in the eyes of his family, whether he knew it or not, Junius explained the process that made witches real in the eyes of early modern society. Unfortunately, the letter likely never made it to his daughter, since it was later found in files related to the Bamberg trials, which means it likely got intercepted before it ever got to her. Luckily, Veronica did not need the warning since she was wise enough to leave Bamberg after her father was accused. However, the last words of her father fell on deaf ears.
Now, dear child, here you have all my confession and the record of my trial, for which I must die. and they are sheer lies and inventions. So help me God, for I was forced to say all this through fear of the torture that was threatened beyond what I had already endured. For they never leave off with the torture till one confesses something. No matter how pious he really is, he must be a witch. Nobody escapes, even if he is a count. And if God does not provide the means to bring things back into the clear light of day, all our kin will be burnt. For each must first confess out loud things he does not know to be the truth about other people, just as I had to do. Now God in heaven knows that I cannot do and do not know the slightest thing. Therefore, I die innocent and as a martyr. Child, I know you are as pious as I am, such that you already have much pain, and if I were to counsel you, you should take as much money and letters as you have and go on a pilgrimage for around half a year, or if you can, get out of the diocese for a time. I suggest you do so until it becomes clear what turn things will take. Many honorable men and women in Bamberg go to church and do their other business, have no knowledge of evil, have a good conscience, just as I have had until now, as you know, and nonetheless are taken to the witch's house. As long as he has his voice, he must go, whether it is just or not. Nüdeker, the Chancellor's son, Kandelgieser, the daughter of Hofmeister Wolf, and Hopfens Els have all confessed against me. All at the same time. I was truly forced into it, just as many others are and will be unless God provides some remedy. Dear child, keep this letter hidden so that it does not circulate. Otherwise I will be tortured so severely that it does not bear thinking about, and the jailers will be beheaded. That is how strictly it is forbidden. You can let Cousin Stamer read this letter quickly and in confidence. He will keep it quiet. Dear child, give this man a Reichstaler. I have been writing this letter for many days. My hands are badly labed. I have in fact been very badly injured. I beg you, for the sake of the Last Judgment, keep this letter under careful watch and pray for me as your father for a true martyr after my death. But be sure you do not make this letter public. Have Anna Maria pray for me as well. You may boldly swear on my behalf that I am no witch, but a martyr. And thus, I die in readiness. Good night, for your father, Johannes Junius, will never see you again.